life like as the son of a strict father, Henry?
It is difficult, but better than being the daughter of a strict father. My sister does not get anything, whereas I get some of my father's land because land belongs to the male line. The English inheritance law states that all land is to be passed on to the eldest son, also called primogeniture. My father is very strict, and everything he says I must obey.
Are you ever intimidated by your father's success?
Yes, all the time. The other day it took me 1 hour to muster up the courage to enter my father's study to ask him if I could take part in his business. As his oldest son, there's a lot of pressure for me to impress him, especially when it comes to his business ventures.
How did he respond once you finally asked him?
Well, he was hesitant to trust me with such a great responsibility, but he realized that it is essential for me to learn how to run the business if it is to continue after he passes.
How much land were you given by your wealthy father?
In the face of a growing scarcity of land in older communities, young men like me are waiting for their inheritance well into middle age. Seeing as I am 17, I have not received my plot of land yet. I must wait until I am about 40 years of age to inherit my land.
What is it like to be a husband and father in colonial America?
Sir Robert Filmer said, "The father of a family governs by no law other than his own will." I take these words as gospel. In my household, I am the only independent member of my family, and all others are dependent upon me. I am essentially a miniature king in the confines of my own household, and respect and subjection are due only to me.
Explain apprenticeship here in the colonies. Is it similar to apprenticeship in England?
In both societies, formal apprenticeship bound master and apprentice by written contract for a term of years. English masters had to be paid more often to take an apprentice than masters in America.
What about servitude in the colonies? Is it similar to servitude in England?
No, servitude in the colonies is extremely different than it is in England. Servants in England make up over 13% of the population, and 60% of young people between 15 and 24 were servants. Middling households often contained 1 or 2 servants, and families of the highest rank would have about a dozen. Most servants in the pan-British world are engaged in agriculture, but in England, rural servants have a different status. They think of themselves as hired laborers. Their contracts with their masters are often oral and bind them for only a year at a time. They move from master to master, and some receive wages and acquire property. In the colonies, servitude is much harsher.
How are you being treated as a female citizen of the New World?
Women are treated as children by their husbands. Henry, my husband, calls me dear child and insists that I address him with Mr. I, in essence, do not have an independent existence. In public records, I am referred to as Henry's wife because I legally belong to him.
What is it like to be a landowner in England?
I wish I could live in America because the men there have much more land. Therefore, they can pass more property on to their sons. Here in England, I am only able to give my son a meager 2 acres.
What is it like to go from being a servant in England to being a servant in America?
Here in the colonies, there are laws designed to control the movement of servants and prevent runaways. But in England, there is much less of a sense of belonging to one's master. Here I am owned and can be bought and sold. I cannot marry, buy, or sell property, or leave the house without my owner's permission. I spoke earlier to the son of a wealthy landowner, and I'm curious to see what you have to say. How much land did your father give to you?
Unfortunately, in many northern communities like ours, at least half of the adult males are without their own land. I'm dependent on my father's land, meaning that I still live under his roof. My wife and sons all live with me in a small part of my father's house. But in New England, where I live, I'm among 1/3 of the community of married couples who live in their father's houses.
How does it feel to be the third-born son of your father? Are you upset with the fact that you will inherit little to no land?
To be honest, I am quite upset knowing that I will inherit less land than my older brothers, even though I am more skilled than them at my father's trade. They will still get the land first because my father believes that they are more responsible than I am just because of their age. Also, my father went as far as to give some of his land to his nephew and my cousin Jacob. But on the bright side, we have more land than we would ever have in England. Back at home we only had 10 acres of land, and here we have more than 500.
After conducting this series of interviews, we see that patriarchal themes dominated life in the colonies and were well accepted, in comparison to the weaker patriarchal themes that are seen in England. A major aspect of the patriarchy in the colonies was the amount of dependence that the progeny of landowning fathers had on their fathers' estates. Not only did the amount of land determine how much money the son would make in the future from producing crops, but it would also determine what class the women that the son marries would be in. This dependence was not seen in England because of their lack of land. Instead, English sons learned to trade from going to school or from their fathers in order to succeed in their life. The dependence in the colonies that England lacked is significant because it sets the values of the societies apart, allowing for the individualization of the colonies. Another major theme of patriarchy within the colonies was classes in society and how members of each class functioned. Wealthy colonist landowners owned an abundance of slaves, both white and African American, and relied on these slaves for all of the manual labor that needed to be done on their estate. Slaves were at the bottom of the totem pole and were the backbone of the societal structure. This greatly contrasts to England society because they did not rely on the work of slaves, because they had no land for the slaves to work on. This difference was extremely important because it changed the way that the societies functioned as they moved away from similarity. At the top of the totem pole were the wealthy, white males that owned plenty of land, and below them were their children and their wives. Oftentimes, women were referred to as children as they had the same amount of rights. Ultimately, patriarchal themes had a drastic effect on the life in the colonies and provided a set, and, for the most part, an agreed-upon structure to the societal ways and were separate from the society that they once followed back in England.